Hello, my name's Cris Eaves, and welcome to Guitar School. In the last video, I introduced you to triads as well as note resolutions, the concept of note resolutions, and how we can use those to kind of guide our solos and everything. And we just went over the minor triads, but in this video, I want to introduce you kind of the major triads as well as to elaborate a little bit more on those other minor triads and the different positions you can use. To further elaborate on the whole idea of note resolutions, it's kind of like we're using the notes from the chords. So, So I take a A major chord here, and I take a A major scale, just say like a A major Ionian scale or the typical major scale, and so on. So let's say I take that first note there and start on an A, and as I go up the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I can number the scale. So I can go A, and I'm going up the notes. The notes I'm going are A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. And so if I take the first, third, and fifth notes of that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so 1 is A, B, C sharp is 3, D, E is 5. So I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 5. So I have 1, 3, 5 is A, C sharp, E. So I have A, C sharp, and E. That's my three notes that would make my triad, an A major triad. If we play them on the bottom, we keep playing that A major triad, like our major, the A major notes, what we call in our. Or I play this A major chord, for example. So I'm just playing an A major arpeggio. We're just the notes of the A major chord, just played one at a time or in sequence. And if I play that A major chord over here, and I take the bottom of it, I can take just three notes, and I end up with kind of a triad, the bottom three notes. And it's a different order than A, C, E, but it doesn't matter, it can be in any order. So like I have, the bottom notes just happen to be C sharp, E, and then A. So I'm playing this A major chord here, and I'm taking the bottom three notes, and I got A right there, my A major triad shape. So it's the 5th fret there. I'm at the 5th position, and so my first finger is going to bar the bottom two strings of the 5th fret, and then I'm going to put my second finger, I'm going to have to reach over. I don't want to touch the bottom string there, or the second string. I want to be only on the 3rd string, so I'm going to put my second finger here. It's going to be on the 2nd fret, or on the 6th fret of the 3rd string there. And if you want, you could even try to start there and then try to get the other finger there, or you could start with the bar finger, the first finger, and then try to reach that over. But you want to make sure you're not touching the string here. You'll get this muted sound in the middle. One way you can test that is if with the right hand over here, with the picking hand, you can pick the strings one at a time and see if it's clean. So sometimes if it's not, like say if I go one at a time, it might be muffled or muted like that. And I have to just check which one is the one that's not clean, and then just try to correct and try to do your best. Sometimes it might be hard to get them all clean at first. So you do your best, but don't stress too much, because sometimes you'll want to let your fingers relax and come back to it when they're a little bit more rested, and you might have to take a break for a minute or something. And then when you come back to it, it'll get a little easier to do. Or, over time it'll get easier to do it the more you do it, as your fingers build and adjust to the shape. And because you got to build some flexibility in the position as well as just like condition your fingers to hold that position. Anyway, so that's the triad there. So we're going to use that shape as our resolution. What we mean by resolution, so there's a concept of being kind of like, not only out of tune and in tune, but like it's similar to the concept of being out of tune. There's this concept called being consonant and being dissonant. So dissonant tends to be something that clashes with the chord you're playing. So let's say I play an A major chord and I play some note like that or something that kind of clashes with that a little bit, you know, it kind of doesn't sound so, or like that there, that doesn't sound very good with that chord there. So we would say that clashes or it's dissonant. But let's say I play that note again and then I go back to a note that's in that triad, that chord tone, a note from the chord. Now suddenly I'm consonant, I'm in tune with the chord. And so now my note sounds resolved. We would say it's resolved. So I can be out of the scale or out of the chord or even out of the scale even. But then I can bring it back to a note if I do that right and in a tasteful way. You know, I can get away using notes that are outside of the chord, that are in the, or as well as even outside of the scale, things that wouldn't normally clash. But you have to kind of know how to resolve it, and that's where your chord tones come in really in handy. And that's why we're using this concept of triads as a way, a kind of a handy way. And with the triads, once you build with the idea of just resolving to the triads on the bottom strings, so I can play a scale, or even add can add like chromatic notes and other notes that are outside of scale. As long as I know how to bring it back and make it resolve to the chord that I'm playing. So that's why the chord tones and the triads are really handy. And with the triads, we can use that as a reference point because there's just 3 triads on the bottom string moving up for A major. So for example, here, I'm going to play A major here, and then I would move up to here at the 9th position, and then one more at the 12th position, which would also match all the way down here at the open position. Like if I played an open chord, be the same thing as the 12th position up here, just a different fingering. So we'd just have 3 shapes though like that, and then it would repeat 12 frets up or whatever, and that's the same for all of them. So for every one, it's just going to be a different starting position, but it'll be the same order and the same 3. And with each one of those 3 triad positions, we can use that as a reference point for where our larger bar chords or our closed chords that we moved around. And so on. So, and then we can use those 2 as reference points for the scale. So let's say a pentatonic scale. And so on. And then I can use the next position. So we use those chords kind of as a reference for like our scales and the licks that we build off of those. So we want to build our licks, what we call licks, just like little ideas that we can use that come from the scales, and we can make up our own licks. But they're kind of like musical ideas that we might use and build off of. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're building off of just very basic, simple licks to start off with, just to get started. Because sometimes the most simple, basic ones are the best, because you can at least to build off of, and then you can use more complicated ones that you learn from different guitarists or different songs or that you make up yourself. But sometimes a very simple one's good because it's flexible. You can make it your own and do a lot with it. I can vary the rhythm. You know, you can change the rhythm around and change the phrasing of it, which notes you slide on. Maybe I slide on the first note. Or maybe I slide from the first note into that note, or maybe I do a hammer. Stuff like that, you know, you can change the phrasing. Maybe I do pull-offs. You know, you can change it around and just make it sound all kinds of different ways with just a basic, simple lick. But I'm still always kind of using that chord or that triad as a reference, as kind of my home or safe notes, my home base, my safe notes, the ones that are resolved and consonant. So that's why it's really important concept when you're building up solos and other things to learn how to do that, because a lot of times you can kind of get away using a pentatonic scale and kind of get away as the chords change, and we can kind of still make it work. And sometimes it'll work that way, but then if you kind of practice with it, you can kind of make a little switch or change here and there with your ear and kind of learn how to do it. But it really becomes difficult when you start using like full major and full minor scales, like 7-note scales. Some of those notes will sound really funny on some of those chords, like if you don't know how to resolve them right to the chord, and that's where those chord shapes change. So again, we can use those triad shapes and try to like figure out the triad for each chord that we're having to solo over. So let's say if we're doing the chord progression similar to last time, we did A minor to D minor. Let's do the same thing, but now instead of doing A minor and D minor, we can use A major and D major. And of course, see in the last video for more reference on the A minor and D minor triad shapes or whatever, you can look at the last video that we did. And then, but for today, we're going to look at the A major, so here, and then we're going to look at D major. So we got A major over here. Again, that's barring at the 5th fret, the first 2 strings at the 5th fret, and then we're going to try to reach our 2nd finger to the 3rd string on the 6th fret there. And try to make sure that you're not touching the string beneath it, you can touch the string above it, that's okay, because we're not playing that right now. But don't touch the string below it, and that'll make it clean. And again, a little trick you can check. So here's the chord here. And a little trick we can do, play the string one at a time. And that'll help us to kind of make sure that we're playing the chord cleanly. Now we have the D chord as well. For this one, we're going to play first finger on the 5th fret, but we're not going to bar it. We don't have to bar it this time. We're just going to play just this first string on the 5th fret. And then we're going to use our pinky on the 7th fret of the 2nd string. So the next string up, we're going to 7th fret. Let me zoom on there. So we're going 5th fret of the 1st string. 7th fret of the 2nd string, but we're using our pinky. And then my ring finger here, my 3rd or ring finger, is going to be on the 7th fret, same fret, but on the 3rd string. So 5th fret, 7th fret, 7th fret. 5th fret, 7th fret, 7th fret. But I'm using my 1st finger, my 4th or pinky, and my 3rd or ring finger. And again, play it one at a time. Trying to make sure you don't touch that 1st string. That tends to be a problem with the pinky or one of the other fingers touching the bottom. As well as sometimes getting both of these fingers in the same fret. Sometimes trying to get it to the edge of the fret because it sounds a little cleaner. It sounds better usually, but a lot of times that's not ideal when you're stacking fingers on the same fret. So sometimes you might have to adjust and slide your fingers over a little bit more to make more room for that last finger in the stack to fit in. Especially when you're doing like a 3-note chord or something, like where they're all stacked on the same, if you're using the same finger. Sometimes you'll bar that with one finger, but sometimes you got to use 3 fingers, and you got to kind of slide and kind of get them in there and adjust sometimes you even have to adjust your hand shape. But anyways, you try to do that, whatever it is, and then play them one at a time until you get them clean like that. And then, but anyways, regardless, that's our reference. We can use those now for a D. And we're going to introduce one more chord too. So in the last one we just did 2, so we left out. We'll go back and do, we'll introduce the 3rd minor shape as well. But right now I want to show you the 3rd major shape that we're going to use. And we're going to use it for E major. So we just did D major. So D major, D and E are 2 frets apart. It's a whole step apart, they would say in music, which in guitar translates to 2 frets. Like there's something called whole steps and half steps in music. And a half step basically is 1 fret, a whole step's 2 frets. So D and E, we would call those a whole step apart, or 2 frets, and they'd be 2 frets apart. So I could take that same shape and move it up 2 frets. But there's another shape that we have that is close by too, just a little bit lower. And so that'd be at the 4th fret here, and we're going to use that. It's kind of like a D major chord. It's the shape of an open D major chord. Again, if we took an open D chord, let's go back here and play an open D chord if you know that. Now if we just take that shape and just move it up 2 frets, we have an E chord, because E is 2 frets, except we're leaving the open string out now. We're just going to do that. Now there is a chord where we've changed our fingering up. So here, let me show you here. So if I change our fingering up from the D, as we move it up here, and so if we change our fingering up to like this and leave the pinky out, or sorry, if we leave our first finger out here, then we could slide that up 2 frets and move our first finger up here to play the 2nd fret now. Now it's the same chord as that open D chord, but it's 2 frets up, a whole step up, which makes it an E major chord. So anyways, we're using that shape of that D, but I'm going to go back to this fingering and just move it up 2 frets. So now I'm just not playing on muting or leaving out the 4th string there, the open string. So that I'm just left with just this, the 3 strings on the bottom. But again, for reference, it's a 4th fret, 5th fret, 4th fret from the bottom up, going 1st string is 4th fret, 2nd string is 5th fret, 4th string is 5th fret. So now I'm using the finger I'd use for a D chord, which is the middle or 2nd finger, the ring or 3rd finger, and then the index or 1st finger. But you can also do it like this. I can borrow my 1st finger across the bottom 3 strings, kind of like we did for the minor and major bar chords where we're borrowing when on this other shape, but in this case we're gonna bar there and then put our 2nd finger on the middle string 1 fret above that, on the 5th fret there. So the key to this one is being able to bar. You might have to slide or adjust the finger. It might be a little different looking than mine based on where the shape of your hand and the size of your hand, but you have to bar that the first 3 strings, and get that 2nd finger on the 5th fret there and make sure it's not touching the other strings. Sometimes that can be a little tricky because you can't touch the top or the bottom string below. You gotta make sure you're right on the tip of that finger. But that's a very handy shape to have down like that, because that you can move around. You can slide it around just like that, but you could do that. But this fingering will come in handy because it's what we'll use to build another shape too that we can use, which is our C form of the cage system. But we'll get more into those other other larger chords here. Right now we just want to focus on the triad. So we have, this is our E major. So now we're going back in the same position now without moving very far. We're going to use all 3 shapes. We have A major, D major, and E major, like that. So there we go, just like that. A major, D major, and E major. And so we use those for our different positions. So we're going to start though with the simple progression. We're just going to play over A to D. So we're going to keep it simple, just A to D. And then we're going to change it, and later on we're going to add the E chord in the mix as well. But for now we're just going to keep it simple with the first 2 chords. And I'm going to show you a little lick here. So we got this new lick here. So we got this, and we're going to use an A major scale. It comes from an A major scale, but it's a very just simple lick here, 3 notes. So I'm going to do this. And change it up here, so. Like that. And so now I'm going to add a note, and that's going to be my resolution now. It's going to come from A major. Now I'm already on a note from the A major triad, so I can use that. So here's my thing again. But I can also go to this note on the bottom, or the 6th, or this note here on the 3rd string, the 6th fret. So because any one of these notes here from the chord, as well as any note from an A major chord or arpeggio. But we're going with just the triad for now, so I have that, so I can go to the bottom string there, the 2nd string, or the 3rd string. Any note from that triad. And now I can do the same lick and I can switch to this D major triad. So same note on the first string, but a different note on the second string. We have the 7th fret, as well as 7th fret on the 3rd string there. So those are 3 examples there. Coming from that triad. And then might as well go over 2, even though we're going to start with the first, just the A and D at first. We're going to show you the E major triad, those resolutions as well. So here we have our lick. And now you'll notice if I do it like this, I kind of have to jump over here to play the first string of the E major triad there if I'm going to use that. So if I'm going to do that, I'm kind of going to have to anticipate. And after that, I could switch to these fingers. But what I like to do, and another little trick you can kind of do in this case, is just kind of hop over here on the 2nd finger after this here, so. And then in like that. So here we go. And then we got this. And then we can use that same trick when we go to the 3rd string. We can use that same finger we used on the 1st string. But we're going to the 3rd string now, so kind of like that. So that's a handy little fingering to have. And the trick is I'm not trying to stretch too much from here to here, as much as I'm just hopping at that moment. And over time you'll build more flexibility here, but I'm not trying to force this stretch too much, as long as I'm trying to be more kind of nimble and stuff. But if you do it smoothly, you don't really hear much of a. It can keep it very smooth with practice, so you don't hear any break. It sounds the same as if I did that. And yet I'm really not stretching that much. So anyway, so that's our E major triad resolutions there. So now we're going to use those, put those all together. We're going to play a little lick here. So we have this little groove going here. We got this backing track going here. And it's going to go from A major to D major. We're going to start with 4 measures to keep it simple and slow, so we got lots of time to think about it and process the next chord that we have to change to. So here we go. Our first resolution, we're going A major to D major. That's the first chord progression, and 4 measures long here. So, all right, let's go. But anyways, so that's the kind of the idea there. So just keeping it simple with that, just based on whatever chord progression or chord I'm playing over. I just changing my resolutions with that simple lick, just something in the key of A major, but just changing it since the song is in A major, and I'm just switching my resolution notes from the A major triad to the D major. And it's hard to say exactly how you do that when we talk about resolving. That's kind of the part of the art of it, and part of making your own sound and how you make these things work and how you make them your own and your own way of expressing is the rhythm and the timing. There's kind of a way of doing it. There's certain parts, like the stronger part of the beat generally tends to be where we want to hit some of those stronger notes from the chord or resolution notes, but it's hard to say exactly how we do that. There's a lot of variation to that, and you can kind of get away. But an important way to making that work is just understanding the concept of dissonance and consonance, and how you can make things kind of pull against or be out of the key, or in the key but outside of the chord. So I can play notes from the scale, like here's an A major chord, but I can play something from A major scale. Like if I keep staying on that note, which is outside of that chord, kind of pulls against that. Can do it some, like it becomes like a melody and works. But if I stay there forever, at a certain point, it just sounds like, you know, the person doesn't know where he is or what he's doing, you know. But if you do it some, it'll work. But like if you do it too much, it kind of pulls too much against it. So it's hard to say exactly how that it's hard to explain exactly how that works, as much as it's more just this concept that we can, if we want to be outside of the key and pull it more out, we can do that. We just have to know and be aware of how to pull it back in when we want to, when we feel that it's tasteful, when we personally feel like, okay, that's cool, I'm pulling it out, I'm out of key, I'm even maybe out of, not only out of the chord, I can go like, I can pull some notes that aren't even in the scale, that are a little out or like chromatic or pulling, you know, as long as I know how to pull it back into the resolved notes of the chord. So that's where it's kind of important, that whole idea of resolution. And, you know, that's what it's all about, just resolving the thing and coming back in, you know, pulling it back in. That's the key. And that'll make your solos just start popping, like now you're on another level all of a sudden. And you don't have to be flashy and play all this crazy stuff, you know. You don't have to, you don't have to be all doing some shredding. You don't have to play a million miles per hour. A lot of times it doesn't work because if you don't have context to it, you have to, it just sounds like a flurry of nonsense at a certain point. You have to know how to sometimes play those simple licks, or just how to pull it back in. Sometimes that's cool, but you got to know how to pull it back into the chord and how to give it relevance. Sorry, but you can throw all that crazy nonsense in later, but you want to start out, you have to know how to be consonant and just pull something back in and how to resolve it. And that's why these triad resolutions are very helpful, as well as, and you can use those later to build onto the larger chord and arpeggios that we can use. So from this triad we can go into the full chord for our resolution, as well as the arpeggio shapes that we can use. And so on. So anyways, but yeah, we just want to start with the triad, because that's what we're going to build all of these shapes off of. And we can practice them all, but it's hard to give it relevance or how to use it unless we have something simple that we can kind of latch onto and build onto and hang everything on, a framework, a skeleton. And that's where these chord shapes and the triads are just, that's where they really come in handy. It's for building that, we use these chord shapes, and there's that whole cage system, and that's useful in a way, but I really like using these triads and kind of building off of that rather than thinking of it like the cage system, because it's a little simpler with just the 3 positions. We can fill in the 5 chord shapes, bar or closed chords from the cage system. We can fill those in using those 3 triad shapes. So that's why I like using those. It's a little simpler, easier for your brain to process. I can see 3 shapes easily just jumping around, and but yet I know where all those other positions of the scales and chords are. So anyways, going back to it, we're going to do a little bit more here. We're going to do same thing now. We're going to do 2 measures. So, oh no, wait, I'm going to repeat. Sorry, my bad. I want you to do this with me. So we're going to do the same thing now, but I want you to do it with me. I want you to really follow along, and I'm going to try to get you. So again, we're going to do it like, oops, we're going to just do that one, and then we're going to try to go through those 3 just like that, and try to follow with me if you can. If it's a little hard, just try to do just one of them if you can. Maybe that one, just stick with that one, or the first string. And just keep repeating that. Just don't worry about if you have trouble switching to the others. But try to follow along with me, because it'll still sound good if you play the others. It's like we're doing a chord together. But anyways. We'll pause. You could fill in a lick, but now so there we go, our A major now. You can switch it around if you want to, if you feel brave, but and then D. Now we end on, from the A major chord or triad. Yeah, so now I'm going to show you a few more examples here. I'm going to play over the chord, have them switch every 2 measures here. So here's the A major triad. A major. D major. Back to A major. So I just keep it nice and simple for that, and then using just the A major and D major triads there for my resolutions there. So just switching between those and just kind of focusing on those while using A major pentatonic scale or A major, adding a few notes from the full A major scale there from that lick, just from that lick, but then I'm kind of just using the pentatonic scale there for the rest. But you can use the full A major scale as well, but we do the same thing. So we just use the same triads for our resolution. So and so on. So and we just focus on those, and you can kind of do the same thing, like play the same lick and change the resolution notes or play different licks, but we use those as kind of our guide points. Thanks for tuning in. See you all later.